Om Shri Sai Ram, fellow viewers. Welcome to Byte Fusion. My name is Darshan, and in today's video, we're going to be teaching you about programming languages. Okay, so when we think of a program, guys, what exactly should you be thinking? So we know that a computer or some machine needs some sort of instructions to tell it what to do. Therefore, in programming, we have something called coding, which you can use to give that machine instructions. Right. So to begin this lesson, I first want to give a shout out to some people who actually subscribe to my channel. I remember your names. So Lorenzo Munsami, Sashimwadi Velu, and Ishman Deva. Okay, thank you guys so much for subscribing to my channel. I hope I can bring good content to y'all, and I'm really glad that you've actually decided to support my channel. You won't be disappointed. I'm going to commit myself, so cool. Okay, guys. So to begin this, I would just like to give you a bit of a small talk, right? So programming is very vast, and technology itself is very vast, and it can be very hard at times to learn. Now, I want you to pay careful attention, and I want you to give 10,800% of your energy to this course, right? And the reason why I say 10,800 is because there's 108 chakra points in your body, right? So God is giving you 108 chakra points. So I want you to use every single one of those. I want to use all of your energy and really concentrate and get something out of this lesson. Okay, right. So to begin, I'm going to talk about a language that's very common to people. This language is very good for beginners, and I think we should start there. Okay, so the first language that we're going to start with is called Java. Okay, so to begin this session, we need to program on something. We need to put our code onto some sort of application or software, right? In programming, we call that an SDE, and that stands for Software Development Environment. So the environment that we're going to use for this video is called Eclipse. So I'm just going to show you what Eclipse looks like. Okay, so Eclipse looks like this. If you go online and you type in Eclipse on the search bar, you should be able to come to the Eclipse Foundation website, and from there you can download Eclipse. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so as you can see, we have this open. We have this entire application open. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create a Java project. That's pretty simple. All you do is you go to File, go to New, go to Java Projects, click on it, and then it's asking you to enter a project name. So for this lesson, we'll call it Java _lesson_1. Okay. And since I don't want to save this in the default location, I'm going to change it. So I'm just going to untick this, go to Browse. Okay, guys. So I've actually created a folder called Java Development. In this, I'm going to create another folder, and this is actually going to be the folder that's going to store all the files in. So I'm going to call this folder Java _lesson_1. And the reason why I'm doing it the same as the project name is because it's kind of accurate. It keeps it accurate, right, and consistent. And another thing you should notice is that I put underscores between my words. I think that's good programming practice, is to put underscores between your words when you try to name a file. And you can see I put them all in small letters. That's because Java recommends that you don't use capital letters. So let's go ahead with that. Okay, cool. So now we have Java. I've selected the folder. I click Finish. And now it's going to ask you to give a module name. We don't really need a module for this lesson, but for the sake of it, I'm just going to click Create. Okay, cool. So as you can see, guys, on the left side here on this panel, we have all these different folders, and the folder the file that you should be looking at is called SRC. That stands for source, and it's called the source folder. So I want you guys to hover over this, right click on it, go to New, and make sure that you click on Class. Okay. And now it's going to ask you to enter a name. So for our class, I'm going to call it Main. It's also asking you for all this other stuff like the modifiers, superclass interfaces. You don't need to really worry about that right now. So guys, this is what is called a class in Java. And at the top here, we have a package. Now you can see that all of these words are actually highlighted in, it's almost like a reddish, it's like a dark red, right? And what these are all keywords in Java. So the keyword over here that's been at the top is package, and that's because we want to specify that we're going to import a package. No, in this case we're going to use the package Java lesson 1, right? Okay, so let me explain exactly what a class is. A class contains objects, attributes, and methods. So this class actually has an access modifier set to public. What that means, guys, is that it's available to all users. And the class, you have to specify the name, the keyword class, and you have to give the class name main. And then in programming, whenever you start a block of code, you have to open it up with braces like this, and then you have to close it with braces to end that block of code. Okay, so the first method that you will use in Java is called public static void main string args, right? And you put square brackets and you open up the braces for a block of code. Okay, so then this is basically your main method. So this method is used for inputs and outputs from like from the outermost part of the outermost. It's basically the outermost function in your code. You don't need to know much about it, but just try to, if you can, try to memorize what it is. Try to memorize this. It's not that hard, guys. Public static void main string args. It will come to you naturally as you program more, so that's good. Okay, so the first thing that you should know about is how to print out to the user, right? And to do that, we want to use a class that's called system.out. System.out. And the method that we use in system.out is called print line, right? And that's what we use. So it's actually print ln. So ln stands for line. And what you want to do is you want to open up these brackets and you want to put a semicolon. Now, guys, this is very important in programming. In Java, it's very important specifically. You should always end your statement in a semicolon, right? That's the syntax of the program, and that's how it works. So you guys should know about that. Okay, so then how do we declare a string? How do we actually put... Okay, let's explain it like this. How do you put a piece of information or data into your function, right? Well, there's actually a specific type of data type, and this is called a string. And what is a string? A string is an object type. It's an object type, and it's basically an array of characters, right? So how do we declare this string? Well, first we have to open up double quotations, right? Because a string must be encased in double quotations. So now we can specify a text or a piece of information. For instance, let's say we want to say Sai Ram students. Exclamation mark, right? So then this is what's going to actually print out to the console, and I'm going to show you this. So if you want to actually run this program, you can either go here by this play button and click that, or you can go by main, you can right click, you can go to run as, and you can click Java application, but let's just take the shortcut and press the play button. Okay, cool. So you can see out here in this console panel, it's actually printing out Sai Ram students. So it's working. Okay, good. Now, whenever you want to print out something, right, you don't always want to print out one piece of information. You might want to print out more than one piece of information. So in other words, you want to add pieces of information together. So in Java, we call that concatenation. And how does that work? Well, I'm going to show you now. So as you can see, it says Sai Ram students, right? So that's how you do concatenation, is you simply put a plus operator between the two pieces of string. So now if we try to print this, it gives you Sai Ram students. So it's working, right? Right, so that's how you print out to a screen on one line. Okay, so there's something else that I want to talk about, right? And that's the use of the print method. So this is actually saying print line. So what it's doing is it's printing a new line. But if we take that out, it prints it on the same line. Now, I want to actually show you the difference between these two so you understand. Okay, so you can see it says Sai Ram in one line and it says students in another line. Now, what if you want to keep this statement here? What if you want to keep this information on the same line as as the text or the string that's been printed above that? Well, you can do that by actually putting the first line, the first statement as just print. So that's going to keep it on the same line. So now if we actually run this, you'll see it says Sai Ram students, and it's all on the same line. That's because the print function doesn't print and then go into the next line. It prints and it keeps that information or whatever's about to be printed on the same line, right? So that's how you can use the output method in Java. Okay, guys, so another thing that I want to talk about is how to use variables in Java. So let's actually define what a variable is. So a variable is a container that holds data, right? So what are these data? These data are different bits of values. These are different values, right? So how do we declare a variable? So to declare a variable, you got to give it a data type. So like I mentioned before, we have a data type called string. And now you want to give that variable a variable name. So let's give our variable the name text inputs, right? So that's our variable name. Now you'll notice that when I type this out, right, I did it in a very specific way. The first letter of the variable is not a capital letter, but for the next word, we have a capital letter. Now in programming, this is good programming practice, by the way, we call this camel case. So what does that mean, right? Basically, you have a text, right? That's a string, that's a variable. And what you do is the first word, for the first letter in the first word, it must be a small letter. And then for each each word that comes after, we must have a capital letter, all right? And this is good because it makes it easier to read the code. Okay, so then how do we use this variable? We have to assign it to a value. So we use the equals operator. It's called the assignment operator, and then we give it a value. So the value that we're going to give it is Sai Ram, right? Don't forget to end in a semicolon. Okay, so we put that there, and now we can take this out, and then instead of having to put manually define a string, instead of having to define a string inside that print method, we can just put the variable name because the variable contains that piece of information, right? So now if we actually try, I'm actually going to put a space here. If we try to print this, it'll say Sai Ram students. Okay, cool. So that's how that works. So now you can also reassign a value to a variable. Like it doesn't have to just be Sai Ram. Like you don't have to declare many variables and change the name so many times. Like instead you could just go onto you could just take that same variable, right? Text inputs. And then you could set it equal to, instead of saying Sai Ram, we could say hello, right? Hello students, okay? And now if we run this, it's going to say hello students, okay? So right, so that's very important to remember. Okay, guys. So the next thing I want to talk about is data types in Java. In Java, we have 8 primitive types and we have 6 numeric types. We also have 1 object type, and you guys already know about that. So I'm going to actually discuss our 8 primitive types that you can get. Okay, so I'm going to just type it out real quick. This is actually there's 6 numeric types that you can get. So we have a byte, we have a short, an int, a long, a float, and a double. So what is a byte? A byte is a numeric type, and it's a non-decimal type, right? So why do we have? So we actually have 4 non-decimal numeric types, and the reason why we have 4 of them is because each numeric type represents a different range of integers that you can use. So the first numeric type can only use only has a short range of numbers that you can use, but as you go higher, you go to short, the range gets larger, right? So long obviously is the largest range that you can use, but for most programmers we tend to use int as our data type. Okay, and then we actually have two decimal types. We have a float and a double. A float has a smaller range than a double, and a float has to be declared with a number. So you put the number, you put your point, and you put your decimal value after that. And you have to, for a float, you have to use the literal F, but for a double, you don't have to use the literal F, right? And you'll notice that for these numeric types, I don't have any quotations. And that's because they're numbers. You don't need quotations for numbers in Java. Okay, so there are actually two more primitive types that are added to these 6 numeric types. So we have a character type. We declare that with the keyword char. We specify the character name, so we can, the variable name. We can say letter, okay? Set it equal, and now when you actually declare a character, you have to use single quotations. So single quotations, and we can type in any character here. So you can type in a letter, you can type in a number, you can type in a special character, you can use an operator like a plus. You can use anything, right? So I'm just going to use, since I said letter, a letter as my variable name, I'm going to say A as my character. Okay, and then the final primitive type, and this is a very interesting one. It's called a Boolean. So a Boolean is a type. It's basically like a switch. The two values that you get are true and false. True is represented by the value 1, and false is represented by the value 0. Now in programming, this is very useful when you have to deal with flags, or when you have to like jump in and out of different situations. Those situations I'll explain in the next couple of videos. But actually, to declare this Boolean, all we have to do is type Boolean, and we'll call it bool. We'll set it equal to true, and make sure that when you type true or false, you type it in small letters. Okay, so then if I had to print all of this out to the console, it should print these values. Okay, so I'm gonna actually show you guys that. Hold on. Okay, everyone, so as you can see, we've actually printed out 1, 100, 1000, 10,000, 45.5, 50.35, 50.35. Okay, so those are actually printed out to the console. So we have declared our variables properly and everything's working accordingly. Okay, so something else I want to talk about is a constant in Java, right? So a constant is a type. A constant is basically a variable that is unchangeable. You cannot change it. So like in the beginning, I showed you that we could change text inputs from Sai Ram to hello. Now in a constant, you can't do that. So how do you declare constant in Java? It's pretty simple. So you use the keyword final, and then you specify the data type that you want to call it. So we'll call it an int. Okay, so we can call it circle area. We can set it equal to right. We'll set it equal to 50. We'll close it. Okay, everyone, so this is basically how you declare a final. Circle area is equal to 50. Now, I want to show you that if we try to change this value, it's not going to work. Okay, so you can actually see that the compiler is giving us an error, right? It's telling us, hey, you can't reassign this value because it's a final. It's a constant type. And I want to point out something that's very important here. Whenever you name a constant, you should always name it in capital letters, and make sure that you put underscores in between each word or each number. Alright, so something else that I want to talk about that's actually very important is numeric operators in Java. So in Java, you actually have something called numeric operators, and how it works is you have the values. So let me just type them out. You have a plus, you have a minus, you have a multiplication operator, which is an asterisk in Java, and you have a forward slash, which is the division, and you have something that's called a modulus. So I think you'll know what the other four are. So let me just explain what a modulus is. A modulus is basically when you divide a number by another number, you get back the remainder of that division. So say if we have 9 divided by 2, right, then our remainder would be 1. So I'm actually going to demonstrate each of these operators really quick. Okay guys, I've actually typed it out. So if you run this, you'll see that we have 2 plus 45 is 47, 50 minus 100 is negative 50. Okay, so I want to point this out. In Java, you can actually work with negative values as well. So just keep that in mind. We also have 5 times 7, 9 divided by 3, which gives us 3, 9 mod 2, which is actually remainder 1. So like I said, you can actually work with negative values in programming. So for instance, I could have negative 5 times 7, right? And that would actually give me negative 35, right? So you can work with negative values. Okay, cool. So let's talk about how we can use those operators together. Okay, everyone. So it's very important that you understand this. When we use numeric operators, it's actually something that's we use to define the order of each operation, and that's called operator precedence. Okay, so how does operator precedence work? Operator precedence works in the following ways. We have a multiplication, division, and modulus, and then we have addition and subtraction. So that's the order of operations. So I'm going to actually type out a statement and show you that it's actually working. Okay guys, so I've actually typed out this expression. As you can see, it's trying to do a calculation here. So we have 5 times 3, which is 15, 7 mod 3, which is 1. And of course, 15 plus 1 is going to give you 16. And we actually have 16 outputted to the console. Okay, so that's how operator precedence works. Now in Java, just like in mathematics, if you actually want to do a certain part of the sequence of numbers first, we can actually enclose that section in braces. So for instance, we could do 3 plus 7 first if we wanted to, and we just enclose it. And now if we run this, we actually get 2, because 3 plus 7 is 10. And we obviously have 5 times 10, which is going to be 50, and 50 mod 3 is going to give us 2. Okay, so I want to show you that you can actually go further than just encasing 3 plus 7. If you wanted to, you could even do the modulus operator first. You could do 3 plus 7, which is 10, mod 3, which is 1, and then we'd have 5 times 1, which is going to give you 5. So if we run this, we have 5, right? So that's basically how we can work with numeric operators in Java. In Java, there's actually something else that you can do that's quite useful, and that's working with milliseconds in Java. So to work with milliseconds in Java, all we do is we type long total milliseconds equals to, and then we use the class system dot, and you can see here we have current time millis, so we just go into that and we put a semicolon. And then basically I'm gonna just type out the rest of it and show you. Okay, let me show you what this looks like. Okay, so you can actually see that we get this really long value here, and this value is kind of messy. It doesn't really tell us anything specific. So what we want to do is we want to actually take this. This is the time that's actually recorded in CPU, right? So we know that this isn't what the time should be. So we're going to take this and we're going to format it so that it actually gives us the real time that we want. Okay, so how do we do that? I'm going to show you right now. Okay, guys. So something important that I want to mention is that in Java, say if you have a long, like lots of code, right? Like many lines of code, and there's a specific variable that you might know about, or that you sort of remember, but it's all the way at the top of your program, or it's somewhere in the middle of your code, and you just can't figure out what that variable name is. So what you can actually do is you can start by typing the name of your variable. So we want total milliseconds, right? You can simply get that variable by pressing these keys on the keyboard. So all you have to do is press Control and space. And then it actually takes you to this list of all these different, options that you have. And at the very top, we have total milliseconds. So we can just click on that, press enter, and it actually gives you that. So that's pretty interesting. That's something I thought you can find useful. Okay, everyone. So as you can see, we get 8:11:46. So that's 8 hours, 11 minutes, and 46 seconds. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this is the system time and not the actual time on your device. So just keep that in mind, right? So I'm actually working according to South African Standard Time, but this is actually another time zone. But you don't really have to worry about what time zone it is. Just know that this is how you can actually get the time in Java. Okay, so another thing that I really want to talk about is augmented assignment operators. So what does that mean exactly? So say you have a variable, right, where you declare it as x, right? So you say int x is equal to 1, right? And you want to add a number to that variable. You can actually do it. You could do it as do it as x is equal to x plus 1, or there's actually a shortcut that you can use that's better. So instead of saying x is equal to x plus 1, you would say x plus equal to 1, right? And we actually don't have to specify the data type again. So this should give us 2. And we could actually change this and put it as 5, and that should give us 6. Right? So and you can actually do this. You can use this augment with any sort of operator. You could use it with a plus, you could use it with a subtraction, multiplication, any of those, right? Another thing I want to talk about in Java is incrementing and decrementing. In some cases, you'll have to basically go through loops. You will have to go through some situation where you will only have to add 1 or decrease 1 from your value. And that's why we have decrementing and incrementing in Java. So how does that work exactly? Okay, so you can actually see here that I've actually declared a variable called y and a variable called x. And I've set y equal to 1, and I've said y plus plus. So this is actually what it's called as a post increment. Plus plus means you're adding 1 to y. Now if we run this, we get the value 2 and 1. So the original value of x stays the same, but the value of y increases. So how do we get it so that x and y have the same value? Then we can actually change, instead of doing post incrementing, we can do pre-incrementing. So we actually put the plus before the y, and we take out the plus after. Now if we run this, both values should be 2. Now we can actually do this with a minus operator as well. So we want to decrement now. We want to decrease by 1. So we put minus minus before the y. Both values are going to change. So we have 0, 0. But if we put it after the y, you'll see that we have 0 and 1. X keeps its original value, and y does not keep its original value. It goes up a level. Right, so that's how decrementing and incrementing works in Java. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this lesson. I just want to talk about a few more things. One thing I want to talk about in Java is how you can actually convert from an integer to a decimal. So let me explain how that works. Okay, so as you can see, I've actually typed out these statements here. I have double x is equal to 100.25, and I have int y is equal to, and now what I've done is I've actually encased the keyword int inside brackets. And that's because I want to typecast x to an integer. So that's what we call, that's basically what it's called. It's called typecasting. So I want to actually convert this 100.25 to an integer. So what that's actually going to do is it's going to truncate. And what does truncate mean? It's going to eliminate this decimal point. So if I run this, I should get 100. Okay, I have 100. So you can actually do it from double to int, but you can also do the opposite way as well. You can do it from int to double. So let me show you how that works. Okay, so now this is actually going to give 100 a decimal point if we run it. You can see it gives 100.0, and that's because we're typecasting to a double, and a double must contain a decimal point. Okay, everyone, so I want to show you something that's actually quite useful. So say, for instance, you want to divide 100 by 3, right? But you don't want to, you want to show the decimal points, right? So if we actually try to run this without this double casting, you'll see that when we do x divided by y, we get 33. Now we don't want to show 33. We actually want to show the decimal points. So therefore we have to typecast this to a double. So if we typecast this, we should get 33 points, and it says 333, and we have all the way to 36, right? So this can be very useful when you're working with money, for instance, or when you're working with really advanced mathematic equations that actually give you those decimal points. But I want you to keep in mind that this double has to actually come before the variable. So if we try to type it after this x, it will give us an error. It will give us an error. You can see it's giving us an error. But even if you can even do it on the other variable, right? You don't have to do it on the first variable. You can do it on the other variable. You could type double here. But this, of course, is still going to give us an error because we have to have it before the variable. So if I take this out and I type double here, you can actually see this is working, right? It works. Okay, so guys, so far we've actually discussed outputting information to the console. What if you want to get inputs from the user? So how do we do that? Okay, well, that's actually pretty simple. All we have to do is we have to actually use something that's called a scanner class. Now we need to import this class from another file. So how do we do that? We use the keyword imports, right? We say import java.util.scanner because we're taking the scanner class from the Java package, right? So that's where we want to get it from. So we got java.util.scanner. So now we actually want to declare our scanner. So how do we declare our scanner? We have to create a scanner object. So we're going to call it scan. We're going to set it equal to new. We have to use the keyword new, and then we specify we have scanner, and then we have system.in, right? To say that we're getting it from the user. Okay, so now we actually have to store this value inside a variable that we get from the user. So how do we do that? We create our variable. So say we want string name, right? And we're going to say it's equal to scan. And now you want to get a string. So to get a string, you use a method called next. So you say .next, right? End it with a semicolon. Go to the next line. And now you actually want to print this out to the user. So we're going to type a statement for that. Okay, so I've actually made it user-friendly. I've actually given this bit of line here. It should be print, not print line. And what will happen is basically you press play. And you have enter your name, right? So, sorry, this is not even play. This is execute, okay? So, enter your name. So, I'm going to type my name as Darshan. And I'm going to press enter. And it says Sai Ram Darshan. Now, if I actually type my full name, which is Darshan Govinder, it's going to say Sai Ram Darshan, and it's not going to get Govinder. That's because we've only taken the first word. To get the full sentence, we actually have to use next line, right? So now if I actually try to execute this, you have input my full name, Sai Ram Darshan Govinder, right? So now that's how you actually input string from a user, right? This is specific to a string. If you want to get, like, say, an integer or a double, then you have to use specific method names. So for instance, scan.nextInt will give me an integer, right? So I have to change this to an int. So scan.nextInt. So you can actually see many of these. You can see we have next int here, next int, next byte, next shorts, next big decimal, all that sort of stuff, right? Okay, so I actually want to discuss something that's really important in Java, and you're going to find this very useful when you program, because it's going to be really, sometimes your program can get really messy, and you can have things that are like just doesn't look right in the right format. For instance, we could have this, and we could have no space between plus and full name. We could have no space between Sai Ram and plus. We could have all sorts of messy. Everything could just be messy, right? Like that, and then it's like it doesn't look like it's formatted correctly. So in Java, you can reformat this. All you have to do is press Control-Shift-F, and it reformats it for you. So that's actually pretty useful. Okay, so I'm actually coming to the end of this lesson. So I want to talk about some key fundamentals in programming that you should know about. And these are called programming errors. So what are programming errors? Programming errors are errors that occur in your program, and there are three types. There are three kinds of programming errors that you can get. You can get a syntax error, a runtime error, and a logic error, right? So what are the difference between those three? So a syntax error is an error where we actually omit a punctuation, or we forget to close a brace, or we mistype a keyword, right? So that's called a syntax error in Java, and that's actually detected at compile time by the compiler. And those types of errors are actually very easy to read. Another type of error that I've mentioned is a runtime error. So runtime errors are errors that the program detects during runtime, and those type of errors are usually abnormal. What will happen is the program will terminate abnormally, and that's how you know it's a runtime error. And then finally, we actually have a logic error, which is a human-prone error. This is not something that the program can figure out. This is a mistake that a human makes. For instance, let's say we actually want to do 3 plus 7, which is 10, right? But instead we type 2 plus 7, and we get 9. Now, that's not the program's fault. That's your fault. So that's a human-prone error. So I'm actually going to test you to see if you actually understand what's the difference between a syntax error, a runtime error, and a logic error. So let's try to test you on that and see if you know. Okay, so I'm going to type out something, and then you have to tell me whether this is a logic error, a runtime error, or a syntax error. So I'm going to type it out, and what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and try to guess what the answer is, and then after that you can unpause it, and then you'll figure out what the answer is. Okay, cool. So let's do it. Okay, guys, so can you figure out what type of error this is? Okay, so if you figured it out, this is actually a syntax error. Why? Because we've declared our data type as string, but we haven't typed the keyword string correctly, because string should be with a capital letter. But as I've shown you, all other data types actually have to be with a smaller letter. So that's one type of error you have. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, can you actually figure out what type of error this is? Okay, so if you figured it out, this is actually a runtime error. Why? Because we're dividing by 0, and we know that dividing by 0 is not possible. In any sort of mathematics, dividing by 0 is just not possible. If we actually try to run this, you'll see that it's not working. There you can see it actually gives an error. Okay, and let's try to do one more error and see if you can figure it out. Okay, guys, so I've typed out another statement. Can you actually figure out what type of error this is? Okay, if you've guessed it, this is actually a syntax error. You're probably thinking I was going to do a logic error, but this is a syntax error. Why is this a syntax error? It's because we're missing the punctuation semicolon at the end of the statement. Okay, viewers, that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something from this lesson. Please comment, subscribe, share, like the video if you would like to, and I will see all of you in the next lesson. Okay, cool. Right, have a great rest of your day. Sai Ram.